Mark's breath came in quiet gasps as he stared into the trees behind him. The eyes were still there, two glowing orbs in the murk of the forest, unblinking, unafraid. He didn't know what it was. A wolf? Another bear? Whatever it was, it had watched them descend into the ravine. And now it waited. But the mother bear didn't react. Instead, she turned back to her cub, nudging it gently with her nose. A soft whimper escaped her throat, filled with something unmistakable. Grief. Mark's eyes flicked between the shadows and the wounded cub, then to the mother again. She wasn't going to run. Not from this threat. She'd already done the unthinkable. Let a human into her world, trusting him with the only thing she had left. His muscles coiled as he backed away from the glowing eyes. Nothing followed. Not yet. He turned back to the bear and her cub, heart pounding. 15 minutes earlier, Mark hadn't been sure he was doing the right thing. Following a massive, wounded bear into the woods defied every natural instinct he had. Even after he'd seen the bear limp and grunt softly, as if calling him, he couldn't shake the fear that he was being lured somewhere he wouldn't return from. He had moved with caution, steps deliberate, eyes never leaving the animal ahead. The rifle remained behind on the forest floor. It felt like a line crossed. A silent agreement made between two species. Each time the bear paused, she looked over her shoulder, ensuring he was still behind her. Each time she grunted lowly, Mark felt the tug of something deeper, something unspoken yet powerful. At first, he had assumed it was coincidence, that her path was random. But soon, the terrain began to feel intentional. She led him across a shallow stream, its water cold and biting as it soaked through his boots. Up a ridge, steep and slick with pine needles. Around fallen trees and boulders that seemed familiar. That's when he realized. This bear knew the terrain, not in the way a wild animal might, but with purpose, deliberately, like she had walked this path dozens of times, like she was retracing steps. Then came the outcrop. Jagged rocks jutted out from the slope, creating a crescent-shaped formation that funneled into a narrow path. Just ahead, obscured by thick underbrush, was something that made Mark's stomach tighten. Blood. Not a smear, not a trail, but splashes, dried and fresh, dark streaks painted across stones and bark. Fur clung to the edges of branches, caught during frantic movement. The air changed, thicker, metallic. The mother bear's pace slowed. She grunted again, but this one wasn't a call. It was low and mournful. Mark ducked beneath a broken branch, heart climbing into his throat. As he stepped past the thicket, he saw the cub. Tiny, barely larger than a house cat, curled awkwardly on its side, one paw bent beneath it at an unnatural angle. Its chest rose and fell, shallow and stuttering. One eye was swollen shut, and a thin stream of blood leaked from its ear. The mother bear lumbered over and nudged it gently. The cub didn't respond. She whimpered, a sound so soft and helpless it tore something open inside Mark's chest. She wasn't trying to trap him. She had brought him here to save her child. He dropped to one knee, emotion flooding his senses in a dizzying wave. For a few seconds, he couldn't think, only feel. All his years as a hunter, all his guilt, all the time he'd spent trying to forget the things he'd killed. And now, here he was, being asked to help save the one thing he used to destroy without a second thought. The bear watched him, not with suspicion, not even with fear, but with a strange, quiet hope. Mark didn't speak. He reached for his pack and unzipped it with trembling hands. Inside was a compact med kit, mostly for cuts, bites, or snake encounters. He'd never used it for anything close to this, but it was all he had. He took a deep breath. His survival training came back to him in pieces. Control the bleeding, stabilize the limb, assess for trauma. The cub whimpered faintly as he approached. Mark held his hands out slowly, palms up, and inched closer. The mother bear didn't move. He took out a small bottle of antiseptic and gauze. Gently, he dabbed at the cub's wounds, ignoring the sting in his nose from the smell of blood and infection. The cub stirred, eyes fluttering open, letting out a high-pitched sound. Fear? Pain? He kept his voice low, calm. "It's okay, little one. You're okay." The bear shifted her weight, but didn't interfere. Her trust in him was absolute now. Mark could feel it, an invisible thread binding them in the quiet wilderness. He worked quickly, tore a strip from the hem of his undershirt to fashion a makeshift sling, used the gauze to stop the bleeding from the ear, checked the ribs, bruised, possibly cracked, but not punctured. Then, just as he was reaching for a second wrap, he heard it. The growl. Not from the mother. Not from the cub. Behind him. Mark froze. Every hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The growl was deep, low, and close. Closer than before. It reverberated through the rocks. He turned his head slowly. A large, dark shape stood at the top of the slope, muscular, lean, and menacing. It was another bear, but younger, maybe male, and its posture was entirely different. No limping, no hesitation. Its ears were pinned and its eyes glowed with aggression. Foam glistened at the corner of its mouth. Mark realized immediately, this wasn't a protector. This was a predator. His mind raced. Was it the one who'd injured the cub? Had it followed them here, waiting for weakness? He scanned the ground for anything he could use. His rifle was still where he'd left it. Too far. He had no weapon now. Nothing but a camera and a pair of trembling hands wrapped in bloodied gauze. The mother bear stepped in front of her cub, growling low, planting herself between the intruder and her child. Mark could feel the tension ripple through the air like a taut wire stretched to its limit. The predator didn't retreat. It snarled and took a step forward. Mark rose to his feet slowly, hands out to his sides. He knew better than to run. But if it attacked, there would be no surviving it. Not for him, not for the cub. He reached back into his pack, groping blindly until he found a flare gun. Small, red, plastic. He'd never used it. He'd hoped he'd never have to. The hostile bear growled again, louder this time. The mother answered with a bellowing roar that echoed through the ravine. But she was injured, tired, bleeding. The younger bear crouched, readying. Mark raised the flare gun with shaking hands and pulled the trigger. A blast of red light shot into the sky, hissing and crackling like fire in a bottle. It sizzled as it flew, exploding in a blinding burst above the trees. The predator reared back, snarling in shock, then turned and bolted into the underbrush, crashing through branches as it fled. Mark didn't move. He stood there, panting, smoke curling from the barrel of the flare gun, as silence settled once more. The mother bear glanced at him, just for a moment, and then lowered her head beside her cub.